Oh, there we are. Okay. Take 2,357. All right. So I'm just going to start this new video, and this one is going to be able to be shared to the public. Appreciate all you guys coming here today. Just start this. What's it say? Okay, first of all, thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you find the information helpful, either to help some other people, or if you're an advocate, or if you're personally going through some difficulties with the ministry, or if you're a lawyer. I appreciate you watching, and hopefully it'll be helpful, my experiences. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on unceded territory. I presently am on the Coast Salish people's territory, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. And I'm Gitxsan, and I am dwelling on this territory, and I really appreciate being able to stay here on this land. This is a trigger warning. Some of what I'm going to be saying may trigger you, and just make sure that you have support. You can stop the video and look for someone who you might be able to talk to afterwards, and then go back to the video if you think that you might be triggered. My name is Achtiwel Galam. I've been doing advocacy for quite a long time now, maybe since I was 20 or longer, in different types of areas of law mainly. And I've been using my traditional laws for as long as I've known them. I had to relearn my traditional laws, as my mom did. She started to be a chief, and that's when I started to have to be beside her and learn proper protocols and laws, and so now I practice them. Although I grew up learning my traditional laws and spirituality, I never connected to them until I was about 20. In fact, I thought that all Aboriginal people had died because that was what I was taught in school. My English name is Stephanie Morgan. My Gitxsan name is Achtiwel Galam, and what it means is not of any use. I'm Gitxsan, and I'm from the Gitxsan Nation, and I'm from the Fireweed tribe. And our house is Wosamlaha, and my crest is a 2BB white owls. This is my family. The top right is my children. I had 3 children. Arizona is the top left, Kayla is the middle, and Conan is the top right. And Conan is my son who passed away in 2006. In the middle picture on the top is my mom, and she's holding one of my grandchildren. And it's a little bit blurry. All of my pictures were blurry that I took, and when I was at my son's funeral. And I just believe that it's because of the spirits that were there with us, including my son. So this presentation is called the Gitxsan grandmother's struggle with child welfare. Now, child welfare is a general term that's been thrown around quite a bit, but basically it's the well-being of a child, and the ministry is usually involved. MCFD, any kind of delegated agency, BACFAST, Mm. And some of the points that I'm going to go over are my experiences maneuvering through the child protection process, and that's what it is my experience and what I've learned and have experienced through each process and through life. So I'm going to touch on the legal coverage, if I had any or not, the removal of assumption of risk, and remove racism, how to remove racism or talk about it, at least become aware of it, and the support, financial support and poverty that grandparents face, and generally third party or extended family. So the barriers that Aboriginal face, I'm going to just go point by point first through some of the barriers. You might hear things in my background. I'm recording from home, so yeah, that's what's happening. I want to talk about racism first. There's an assumption of risk with Aboriginal people. These are just a few articles that I threw in there where there's an assumption of risk and our children are removed right away, or we are killed, or there's just racism in many forms. Most of it is systemic, and some of it is comes through just assumptions that are made about Aboriginal people. And there's socially accepted racism. Socially accepted racism is, it looks like when you are practicing policies and procedures that are put together by an organization or job or the government, and you work at those agencies and practice the policies and procedures, and you know something's wrong. If this was, you start to think, if this was a white family, I don't think they would have to have a status card to get the medical, like they wouldn't have to have their status card to go to see a doctor, something like that, right? If you compare it to your family, every situation an Aboriginal person goes through, and you see that it's not reasonable or unfair or unjust, then that's probably systemic racism. But you continue to practice the policies and procedures, and that's called socially accepted. Because you feel powerless, or you don't want to make changes, it's too much for you, it's too overwhelming. You might get in trouble, you might lose your job. And this is how all of Canada is. You might lose your job. So that really keeps people in line from talking about the racism and making changes. Barriers Aboriginal face continued. Legal aid coverage for third party. This is an ongoing issue. So many of our Aboriginal children are in care, and legal aid coverage is necessary to press the issue and to remove the assumption of risk. So yeah, we need a lawyer to step up and press the issue and to remove the assumption of risk. That should be part of a lawyer's job, or one of the main jobs. So for legal aid coverage, to determine coverage, legal aid talks to the social workers. And for me, this is a conflict, because when you're representing a client, you shouldn't really be talking to the social workers. And so, but today in BC, this is what's happening to determine third party coverage. And it is necessary because grandparents and family members need a lawyer to remove the assumption of risk to get our children out of care and back with family. There's so many of our children in care, and so many assumptions that are not being removed, and they're just circumstantial. There's no proof. So going on, those are a couple things. Aboriginal content in this process. Through every process, I always use my traditional laws and my knowledge of my community, my Aboriginal community. I will pull in other Aboriginal people if they're there and have them support me throughout the process. Any kind of advocates that are available that are Aboriginal, I'll have them help me. So this is what I encourage any Aboriginal person. There's a lot of there's so much fear that freezes people from getting a lawyer. They don't want to start trouble or wave the boat, or is it rock the boat? And they don't want to do anything because the social worker might keep the children longer. It's a big mistake, because the longer the child is in care, there are timelines. So after 1 year, a social worker can look to do a CSO. CCO, CCO, which means they can keep the child and start to look for adoption. It's not much time. So it's really good to encourage the community to be involved that you trust, that is trusted by the client, by his trust. I've always used people that I trust to be involved in the process with me, and this is to create pressure for the social worker and the director to return the child. Oh yes, and the Indian bands, they don't have the resources to advocate for a child to be returned home. A lot of the time, a social development worker has got to add that to her her work. It really is not a social development worker to be doing an advocacy job, because they do social development. But it is added to some of the social development workers' job on the Indian reserves. There's no funding that's given to the bands to help to get an advocate to have the children removed. There's only a few places that have been given funding by MCFD. They've made an agreement, and those two that I know of is the Gitxsan band, who's had an advocate for many years now, but they only serve children who are on reserve. And the Wet'suwet'en have recently made an agreement, I guess in 2019, and they have an MCF agreement made, so they have advocates to help on and off reserve Wet'suwet'en children to return to their families. These are just some articles I threw in. You can look them up, but these are ongoing, and this is just an example of traditional laws being used to advocate. Child protection advocates, again, are very important. An advocate can talk to the social workers and help to press the issue and remove the assumption of risk. Remove the assumption of risk. The child protection advocates, their main job is to help a client to maneuver through the legal process and to get the children back, and to make sure that there's financial funding in place for the grandparent or family member. The lawyers cannot talk to the social workers. A lawyer can only talk to the director's counsel or the director's lawyer. This is important for everyone to know, because not everyone just knows this. And no one says it, no one talks about it, but this is basically what's happening. So a lawyer can, like many lawyers, only go with what the social worker is saying, and even the director's counsel has to represent their client, who is the director and MCFD and the delegated agency. And their main job is to advise them. But what can be put in court is only things that have evidence. And I never really see a lot of evidence. I see a lot of rumors and hearsay being put forward in an affidavit that is taken as evidence. So this is what's keeping our children in care: rumors and hearsay. So an advocate, it's really important to have meetings, like with the lawyer, the director, and with a social worker, with an advocate, and with a client, all together. I know it's excruciating. The whole process is extremely stressful because you're constantly being criminalized every day. Every time you talk to the social worker, you're constantly being criminalized. You're drunk, you're an alcoholic, you're a drug addict. Even though there's no evidence of that, these are the assumptions that are being read over and over by every social worker every time, and they want you to address it. Even if there's no issues, they just want to tick off the box and say, okay, you've gone to treatment. But when you go to treatment, then it's okay, you have to have 2 years clean, you have to have 3 years clear. Have you been to this meeting? You haven't been to enough meetings. So, if you don't have a drug problem or alcohol problem, don't start and don't go, because that's adding to their evidence. And it's ridiculous. You start to be going on a cycle that they enjoy to just put you on, because then they don't have to deal with you for a while. And it's not, I mean, I'm not putting social workers down if they have a tough job. But what I'm saying is that they're overworked. There's too much paperwork. The government has put this in place, and it's keeping our children in care. And in the end, they never get returned. Most of them don't get returned. So have meetings with everybody so that your lawyer can talk to everyone. Your lawyer can remove the assumption of risks in these meetings, and the advocate can follow up and affirm and reaffirm that these assumptions were removed already by the lawyer. And even then, an affidavit can be put together by even the advocate, because they were there and witnessed that this was said. Oh, okay. You can look those up later. I just threw them in there. So the last thing for Aboriginal barriers is poverty. As you know, most of our children are in poverty, not just Aboriginal, but children in Canada most of them live in poverty. So it's really important to make sure that a grandparent or the extended family have financial support in place. And over the time, I've learned that you can either go straight through the CFCA process, and that'll get you financial support, 54.01 or 54.10, or any other one. And then otherwise, you can get a supportive file open. If you have to do an FLA, you can keep a supportive file open, and they will continue to pay for childcare if you're working. Okay, so, and then you'll get your child tax. But childcare is so expensive. Most grandparents end up quitting work, and that goes, then everybody goes right into poverty. Your children, you, and homelessness. Oh my gosh! So there's just so many problems when you don't have financial support. So this is a great time to take a break, because I know that was a lot of information. This is a great time to take a break and just stop the video there and have a drink of water. Okay, so welcome back. So this is a video that I did, and you can look that up too. It's just advocating, and United Way has funded the parent support services, and this is one of the places that I've called a few times to get advice from the lawyers, which is always great advice for a grandparent. The grandparents raising grandchildren, law line. Party to proceedings, another added ongoing thing that it's not really an issue unless unless you needed to get coverage for something. So party to proceeding, I've never been added as a party. I've had 4 grandchildren that I have tried to get out of ministry care, or had to get out of ministry care, sort of. And I've never been added as a party to proceedings through the CFCSA process until the very last court date. And on that, they add you as a party, and they give you an order, either 54.01 or 54.10, or one other. There's a few other ones that are under that. Side Gitx. So this is my daughter, and her Gitxsan name is Gitx. It means suddenly awoken. Suddenly awoken. This is my daughter Kayla Sky, and this is her with her children. So since my son passed away, she struggled more with addictions. And so it's all of her children that I have. She has 4 children, and those are my grandchildren. And that means that they are Gitxsan because their mother is Gitxsan, and that is our traditional law. I put this on here as a reflection of what my first 2 grandchildren would have as financial support. So before Gordon Campbell's cuts, if you know Gordon Campbell, we used to have what was called a child at home of a relative. So this could be given to any grandparent, even without an FLA order. But you could have an FLA order. But a child at home of a relative was given to grandparents or family members who were looking after a family member, like a child that was in their family. And so the social worker would give you a letter. You could bring the letter to the social assistance office. You wouldn't have to apply, and it wouldn't affect your income. It was just support for the child. So you would get this amount that's on there. And yeah, so it was great. It was very humane, a very humane process, and you wouldn't have to go through anything to get it. When this was removed, I believe that we started to be forced to go through the child protection process. Forced to go through if you wanted financial support. Gwalchmich. Gwalchmich. This is my first grandchild. Gwalchmich is his traditional Gitxsan name, and he was given it in the potlatch feast. And it means that Gwalchmich means red sun. His full name is the Day of the Red Sun. And what that means is a few days before he was born, I dreamt of the land was burning and burning for many months, and it couldn't be put out by any human power. And so the people continued to pray, and they had to move up to the mountains because people started to die and all the animals were leaving. And so they continued to pray, and then God's grace came and brought some clouds that gave small drops of rain that smothered the fire out. On that day, a red sun appeared, and that's why it's called the Day of the Red Sun. The Day of the Red Sun means God's grace. Scooby. I've changed the names of my grandchildren just to protect their privacy. So some names are different in here. But Scooby was born in 2001. And so he was never removed physically. So this is a very humane process. They knew that his mom was living with me and that I was looking after my grandchild. And I just want to think, you know, if you think about your grandparents, the grandparents you love, and or someone older that you love, right? And you think about them and you think you want to live with them. If anything ever happened to someone you loved that was looking after you, who would you feel safe to live with, you know, out of your family? And then you would just go stay there because that's your family. You know, that's your family. So that's basically what happened. They didn't go through the whole process. That's insane right now with all the policies and procedures and the systemic racism. They just gave me a letter. The social worker gave me a letter, and I took it to the social assistance office, and they gave me the child and home relative financial support to help me with the cost of his daily living. And I also got child tax. And I didn't need an order to do that. I just had to apply. And I used the social worker's letter again for that, just to show proof that my grandson was living with me. There's no need for Aboriginal content for this because it was just like a one dayer. It wasn't even, it feel like it didn't even happen. And I did get legal aid coverage. It was so subtle because it was really simple process. So family coverage, and I didn't get an order until 2006 because I really didn't need it. I was getting financial support. I didn't have any problems with trying to make everybody believe that this is my child and I'm the grandparent. And so I didn't get an order until 2006, which was the FLA order. I got custody at that time. School us. School us. So this is going to be a little bit longer. This is my second grandchild. So if you need a break now, take a short break. And then it's going to be about 3 pages. Okay, let's get started. Global Us means ocean starfish. My grandchild was born very fair and he had a huge starfish on his leg. Now, Global Us is transgender, so I may make mistakes with his identity, but he prefers to be called he. So Benito was born in 2006. My daughter was struggling with drugs previously to the pregnancy and then was drug-free through most of the pregnancy. And at the time of birth, she was drug-free. She was living with me, very similar to the first situation. She was living with me still, and the child was born, and she and the grandchild lived with me also. And I was primarily giving care for the child. And her boyfriend, who is not the biological father, stayed with us also. So my son died a week after my grandchild was born. And so VacFast was a delegated agency at that time with us, and they allowed me to go to my son's funeral. And once we returned from my son's funeral, they removed Benito. And it was one of the toughest processes I've been through to get a grandchild out of care. And so the director faxed the Indian bands, and the elected chief became involved and worked against me to get my grandchild back. I sort of knew the elected chief. We definitely had some problems between us, and so likely that's why she chose to fight to keep the child in care. And so I decided I would get my hereditary chiefs involved. My mom and my dad are both hereditary chiefs, which I am privileged to have in my life. And the other chiefs are always helpful to us. In partial, they are obligated, but also they do want to help. So I wrote letters and they signed them. Even the hereditary chief's office signed a paper just confirming that this child belongs to the Gitxsan nation, following our traditional laws, and that the province has no jurisdiction over our child. And I also had an Aboriginal advocate helping me, my sister's friend, who was a social worker previously. And so she reluctantly helped me throughout the process because I could not get a lawyer. At this time, legal aid did not cover the cost of lawyers for a third party. So there was no third party coverage, and from that time when I was refused, I started to advocate that legal aid cover a third party, because many of our children are in care. So I don't see why they wouldn't cover them. I mean, I believe the mandate of legal aid is to help with legal issues, and this is a legal issue, especially for our Aboriginal children to get returned home. I did see Michael Bradshaw at the Family Legal Center at Legal Services Society. Because I couldn't get legal aid coverage, I was able to get advice. And he gave me the advice to press the issue and involve the community. And those were the two main things, that the ministry, the workers are overloaded, understaffed, they have too much paperwork, and it can easily be pushed aside for months and months to where the children would stay in care. That was the best advice I was given almost my whole life. So in the end, with support from my hereditary chiefs, when it came down to it, the last meeting with the director and the Gitxsan chiefs, social workers, and the elected chief, the director would not start our last meeting until the elected chief was in attendance, because that was the director's only support. So she was criminalizing me, saying that I was lying about so many things that I don't even remember. And yeah, anyways, so once we did start, the elected chief of our Indian band stepped down because all of the Gitxsan hereditary chiefs were there, and this is where the elected chief lived on our territory, the Gitxsan territory, and this is where the hereditary chiefs were the law. And this forced the elected chief to step down, and all she said in the meeting was, I agree with the elected chiefs. I mean, I scratch that. I agree with the hereditary chiefs, and I believe that the child should be returned to the grandmother. And so in July 2006, I got a FLA agreement, a FLA guardianship order and custody, and I also got the child and home relative financial support, which was still there before Gordon Campbell's cuts. Okay, so that was the MCFD process. I did get asked a question about this difference between the delegated agency and the delegated agencies like BACFAS and the MCFD agencies. And the difference is that they both follow the same law of CFCSA. They both follow the same law of CFCSA. They both have the same policies and procedures in removing children, but the delegated agencies is only for Aboriginal children. So in no way is a delegated agency traditional. Anything that is started by the government, that is run by the government, is in no way practicing traditional Aboriginal laws or culture, in no form or fashion. And I'm going to say that because, well, I am Aboriginal and I've experienced every process. And sometimes they will bring in, like everybody, they will bring in Aboriginal people to do workshops. And when Aboriginal people do workshops, that doesn't mean that it's part of my culture or my traditions or even my laws. But I do appreciate those people, and I'm thankful they're getting work. And the prayers that are given by these people who are brought in, who are paid, I really appreciate that too. But that is not the traditional process, and in no form or fashion or way is any government, Canadian government system, process, or law part of our traditional Gitxsan laws or any traditional laws. So those are the differences between the delegated agency and MCFD, is that one is specifically for Aboriginal people, which is systemic racism in itself, just like the Indian Act or anything else that says Aboriginal on it. It's made by the government. So let's move on from that one. This is a bit lengthy. I'm going to try to shorten it because this is family law. This is separate from the ministry, which I didn't know when I started getting into this. Like in 2006, I mean. So Benito was kidnapped by her stepfather. My daughter, we were pretty naive, and well, my daughter wanted to have her boyfriend on the order to have access with her. It's the worst thing I ever did, but I said, okay, sure. What I did not know is that he had added himself to the birth certificate. So many things that he had added himself to when he knowingly was not the biological father of this child. And so this caused me a lot of problems. Like, it caused my grandchild a lot of problems. So anyways, the stepfather had said, well, you've been through a lot. You know, you just lost your son and you just got Benito out of care. So if you want me to take the child with me to visit my family, I can take her for a week. So he never returned with my grandchild. And I didn't know what to do. I had this order, and at no time did it pop magically into my head to enforce the order or to respect an existing order. At no time did that ever magically pop into my brain to do that. And I wouldn't know how to do that anyways. So after alienating my grandchild for a while, he gained guardianship, which this is the new law, is guardianship, right? This is what happens when you change the laws. So he got guardianship, and then he made an application, and I did not know how to respond to that application. This was not covered by legal aid. Again, there was no coverage for this because I already had an order in place. So there was, no legal aid for me. I had a 30-minute advice session with Access Pro Bono, and the lawyer only knew how to work with the parents, like the mom and the dad. So when a grandparent goes in there and tries to ask how to get my grandchild back, even with an order, it was extremely overwhelming, and the lawyer did not know how to give me advice. I got no advice from this Access Pro Bono. It was then I realized most lawyers don't know how to deal with third party. Most lawyers don't know how to deal with third party. And that they only know how to deal with the mom and the dad. So I did it myself. I did everything wrong. I didn't respond properly. I checked the wrong box and agreed when I wasn't trying to agree. And I didn't know how to respect their existing order, how to put that in place. But even if I did, the paperwork wasn't done properly. So everything I had said in the things that I wrote down were lost or not even added in the Prince Rupert courthouse. So I lost my granddaughter to the stepdad. I involved my Gitxsan chiefs throughout this whole process, but Canada uh, doesn't recognize our traditional Gitxsan laws. They're supposed to. I mean, that's what the law says, but they do not. They do not acknowledge that law. They don't. It has no weight in court. So after ongoing alienation, the stepdad got guardianship. In 2010, I made a new application because the alienation continued. I was totally disregarded, and the stepdad kept telling everyone he was the dad, and that basically the child had no other family, just his family. And he lied to his own family for many years, saying that this was his child. I think he fooled his family for years with this lie that he told. So all of his family were lied to, and they believed that this was actually their grandchild, their niece. So I didn't have any communication. He constantly cut off or changed his phone numbers. He'd move. I'd have to start all over trying to find them. So then I brought it back to court. I managed to get denial of access covered by legal aid. With all the back and forth, all my hours were used up in no time. I didn't even get to the court dates. And all of my hours were depleted for legal aid, and not even to get to the trial date. And I asked for a change of counsel because I didn't feel like, well, my hours were depleted. So I asked for a change of counsel because I felt like the alienation and my traditional laws as an Aboriginal person should have been enough weight to return this biological child back to the family. But in Canada, that is not the case. In Canada, you can lose your biological children from your family because of the laws and how it's constructed. Someone can, if you alienate a child long enough, you can gain guardianship. And this ongoing alienation only gives you more power. So this was the issue I was having. My change of counsel was denied. And then I appealed that, and that was also denied because I had no merits. Because they knew in Canada that my traditional laws and the circumstances where the child is being alienated has no weight in Canada anymore because he already has guardianship. Doesn't matter if he's alienating the child. So in the end, I lost all of my guardianship rights and all of my access. Well, I got limited access and limited parental responsibilities, meaning I can see her report card. So in 2015, as soon as I lost that case, the stepdad right away applied for child support from me as a grandparent. So this was a case precedent. So because the child had been alienated for so many years, I didn't gain any guardianship. Like I lost guardianship. So although I did not lose guardianship, I should have. In this with this application, but this application was just dismissed, and I still maintain guardianship. I don't really know how that happens, but basically it was dismissed because I did not have any time with my grandchild enough to say that I should pay child support. And this is the last one. After this one, we should take another break. So in 2019, yeah, it's 2020 now. 2019, I got a message on Facebook from a Aboriginal support worker from my grandchild's school. And the support worker told me that my grandchild was being abused for quite a few years, well, 3 years, I guess, and that the ministry had ongoing involvement, and my grandchild wanted the support worker to help find me. This is how I alienated the child, is because couldn't just pick up the phone and call me. Every phone that I gave my grandchild, they'd hide or put it way far in the cupboard so that he couldn't call me. Any tablets I gave him, they would never let him use. I set up direct contacts like on Facebook to FaceTime me. They deleted that. Just extremely horrible criminals. And then there was ongoing abuse, which of course, you know, is devastating, but he's getting better anyways. So I did get third-party access because his child protection file was opened, and I got the primary FLA guardianship order again in April 2019. I see. It's actually December 2018, and then in 2019, I got that FLA order. That date's wrong. Just ignore that. And I got child tax, and then I'm starting a child support application for both of the fathers to help. It's not really that important, but that's where it is. So we can take a break, and then we can start on Angel's. This is my third grandchild. So let's start on Angel. Angel is my baby boy now. And Angel was removed at birth. He was born premature and addicted to heroin. My daughter was getting help from Shiway. So if anyone knows Shiway, it's a really amazing place that they help women who have addictions, and they're very humane. They help with the process, making sure that they have enough food to eat, and getting them ready to give birth, and everything. They try to make sure everything's in place. So they're very wonderful people. So my grandson was addicted to heroin when he was born, and so he was removed at birth, and I again involved my community, my Aboriginal community, always the same. My chiefs and I'd always write letters, and they would sign them just to confirm that this is our child, the Gitxsan child, and stating that this child's mother is Gitxsan, therefore they are Gitxsan. And that's following the laws of matriarch. So I did get 3 legal aid coverage again, and so it took me a year to fight to get my grandchild out of care. So in June 2017, I got a CFCSA order, 54.01, and a custody order. So now you can see that there's third-party coverage for Angel. I advocated, after I couldn't get third-party coverage, I advocated to get to legal aid to give third-party coverage to grandparents, because many of our grandchildren or our children are in care, and we can't fight without a lawyer, or can't fight without a good lawyer. So with the CFCSA, it includes childcare and financial supports. I went through this whole process, and it took a year to get my grandchild out of care. And I went through the whole process because there was no longer child in home of a relative. Child in home of a relative, I would have just done, I would have been able just to do an FLA order. But now, with the process the way it is, I needed childcare. Otherwise, we would have just gone into poverty if I just took the child. So I went through the whole excruciating process because I felt that I had no other way. I had no other way. So after a year, it was a little bit less stressful because I had a lawyer to help me through the process and to press the issue. And in those meetings where they were criminalizing me and trying to say that I'm a criminal, so that's why I can't get my grandchild back, the lawyer was in the meetings and removed those assumptions of risk. But the process has gotten a lot longer. Over the years, the process has gotten a lot longer to complete. So it took a year. The first one, there was 0 time in care. They didn't have to remove. And it was the same situation where my daughter was living with me and my grandson was staying with me and I was caring for my grandson. 0 time the first time. The second time my grandchild was living with me, my daughter was living with me and her boyfriend, who they ignored. And that time my grandchild was removed. Same situation, but they removed for no reason. The third time is they had no funding available for me to get childcare because there was no child in home of a relative available anymore. So I had to go through the whole process of CFCSA to make sure I could get financially support my grandchild while I work. And so yeah, that's as far as we are. I'll talk about that more, but I just want to be really clear about this financial support situation, which if you just go get FLA, most likely the child will go into poverty. Dex. So this is my grandchild who was born in 2017. So Dex was born about 3 months premature and addicted to heroin. The withdrawal wasn't so bad because she was so young, but she was also removed at birth for the same reason. My daughter was getting help from Shiwei. It was very inhumane. They removed the child at birth and they wouldn't even allow my daughter to see the child. Whereas the first time it was very humane and natural, where they would actually treat the mother like a mother. it's gotten so horrible in Canada that people are not treated like human beings anymore. And this addiction word gets thrown around, and it's like you're not allowed. Aboriginal people are not allowed to drink. Aboriginal people are not allowed to use drugs. But in my experience as a victim service worker, and I worked on 211 answering calls, not once have I ever heard of a child being removed because the parent was using drugs, because they had their family member there. And it's like, oh yeah, they're staying with their mom so the mom can keep the child safe. But now with Aboriginal people, if I'm staying there, I'm criminalized, and my children are criminalized. The whole family's criminalized, and you're probably not going to get your child back. That's how it is. So, anyways, a bit downer, but anyways, so yeah, she was born. She was addicted to heroin for quite a while. I didn't think Dex was gonna survive, but she did, and I involved again my hereditary chiefs. It gave no weight as usual to the process, except for the second one, but it gave no weight to this process. And we wrote letters to Gitxsan chiefs, and they were in full support as usual. It gave no weight at all. And so when my grandchild turned 2 years old, I did get legal aid coverage for Dex. And yeah, so usually they will talk to the social workers to see if I'm actually being looked at to get the child. It's 50-50 chance they might say yes or no. I think it's 50-50, maybe worse than that. So when my grandchild turned 2 years old, I wrote the bands a letter to see if there's any help that they could provide. And although I knew already that they don't get funds to provide advocacy to anyone, especially offers or natives, I tried to contact the Kitwanga band, which is my daughter's band. And bands are separate from traditional laws, just to remind you. And then the Gitxsan Indian band, I also contacted them. So the only band that got back to me was the Gitxsan band, because I told you earlier that only the Gitxsan band and the Wet'suwet'en Nation have advocates that are paid by MCFD. But the Gitxsan band normally only helps Gitxsan who are on the Indian reserves. But they agreed to help me this time, which I was so thankful for. And I only asked for the advocate's help because I knew who the advocate was, and I had worked with her a little bit before. Not in the same job or organization, but just in the community. So yeah, I mean, so she helped me. And right away, within a few days, the director agreed to an FLA agreement, or FLA guardianship order, with a supportive file to pay for the child care. Yeah. Okay, so that was in 2000. So my grandchild is almost 3 years old now and still in care. She's been in care for so long that it's really tough for her to return to the family. We've tried to keep visits going, but with the COVID, it's been a little bit tougher. But then because there is an order made that COVID is not an excuse to to not have visits. They removed that risk, and now we can have visits. But because of that break, it's been really difficult for my grandchild to come back home. The social worker said they'll help by getting a PACE worker, but that hasn't happened. And so that was in July, and July 2020. And so in October, well, July, I got an interim order, FLA interim order. That's right after the agreement was made, like a few weeks after. And then I got my FLA guardianship order on October 30th, 2020. Yes, that's right. So Dex will be turning 3 next month and still transitioning home. Right now, she's only at 1 day overnight a week. And so that's pretty good for us right now. It's lousy, but we'll get there. And yeah, so now I have child care paid for because they're going to keep a supportive file open. And she's gonna be in foster care on and off until she fully transitions home, which I'm imagining at the rate we're going another 3 months or so. July, August, September, October, November, December, January. So yeah, hopefully by the new year, right? Who knows? So I think that's about it though. This is basically my last grandchild. I have guardianship now and I'm transitioning her home. So I hope that wasn't too dry for you. I know it's a lot of information, you know, you might have to watch it a few times. But I appreciate your time. For anyone who wants to know, my lawyer now is Tony Percassin, so pretty awesome. And yeah, so and just to let you know, like, it's the client who has to direct who the Aboriginal community is for them. Some people don't live in their own communities and will use the resources around them. They may not trust the band and will use their traditional Aboriginal community that's around them, the people that love and help them where they are. Anyone in the church, it's all relative. Like, it's all relative. So any Aboriginal person that's helping can help with letters and things like that. So my family, I just wanted to throw some more pictures in there of like when we went to Disneyland and yeah, so cute pictures. My boy's doing a burning. I did a presentation on a burning before, and just feed the spirits. This fan is being kept at the PLC in Smithers. And so you can always email me if you want a copy of this PowerPoint. So thank you very much again for your presence here today. And take care, be safe.